Most people know Rosa Parks for, one single moment on a bus,
Yeah.
a quiet act of refusal.
Right.
But if you only look at that one snapshot, you miss the real story. You miss the decades of activism and the intense training that made that moment possible.
That's the most important context here. We're not talking about a tired seamstress who just snapped one day. We're talking about a highly trained, highly respected activist who is strategically ready to challenge an entire system.
So to really understand her, we have to look at the whole picture. The world she grew up in, her work as an organizer, and the incredible movement she sparked.
And that means starting with the historical stage. You have to understand what life was like in the American South under the rules of Jim Crow.
So what are we talking about exactly?
We're talking about a harsh, state-enforced system of racial hierarchy. Rosa Louise McCauley was born in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1913. So from day one, she had this firsthand awareness of inequality.
She grew up on her grandparents' farm in a place called Pine Level.
Mm-hmm.
And her family, whose ancestors had been enslaved, they taught her these core values: dignity, hard work, and the power of education.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is happening under the shadow of Jim Crow laws. Can you break down what that actually meant for people's daily lives?
It meant the total separation of white and black people in almost every public space you can imagine. I mean, we're talking separate drinking fountains, separate waiting rooms, separate entrances to buildings.
It wasn't a suggestion. It was the law. It was the law. And its purpose was completely clear: to maintain systemic inequality.
Let's focus on the buses in Montgomery, because the rules there were, they were designed for a very specific kind of humiliation.
They were truly absurd. A black passenger would have to pay their fare at the front door next to the driver.
Okay.
But then they had to get off the bus and walk to the back door to re-enter.
Seriously?
Oh, yes. And drivers would often take their money and then just drive away before they could get back on, leaving them stranded.
And what about the seating itself? The seating was flexible, but not in a good way. There was a movable sign that divided the white and colored sections. If the white section filled up, the driver had the authority to just move the sign back.
And force black passengers to give up their seats.
Exactly. You were required to surrender your seat to a white passenger. It wasn't a choice.
That context is just vital. So she's living with this every single day. Let's talk about how she prepared for that moment on the bus, because it really started decades earlier.
It did. It began in the classroom. The schools for black children had, extremely limited resources. She had to walk miles just to get to class.
While the white students had a bus.
She watched the bus for white students pass her every single day, a very clear physical reminder of the system.
And she had to stop her schooling a few times, right? To care for her family.
Yes, first her grandmother and then her mother, but she was determined. She went back and earned her high school diploma in 1933, which was incredibly rare for an African American in the South at that time.
And that persistence carried over into political action.
It did. In 1943, she joined the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP. And she didn't just join, she became the secretary, working right alongside the president, E.D. Nixon.
And being secretary wasn't just, taking minutes at meetings. What was her actual work?
She was the lead investigator. She spent years meticulously documenting cases of discrimination, violence, and especially voter suppression.
So she's building this deep practical knowledge of how the system worked and where its legal weaknesses were.
Precisely. And she took that even further. In the summer of 1955, just a few months before the bus incident, she attended the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee.
And this place was critical. It was a training center for social justice and nonviolent protests.
Exactly. At Highlander, they didn't just talk theory. They ran drills. They role-played scenarios on how to react to violence and threats during a protest. She literally rehearsed the very situation she would face on that bus. Her refusal wasn't an impulse.
It was a rehearsal.
It was.
Which brings us to December 1st, 1955. She's coming home from her job as a seamstress. She boards the bus and sits in the first row of the section for black passengers.
Right. The bus fills up, a white man gets on, and there are no seats left in the white section. So the driver, James Blake, orders Rosa and 3 other black passengers to get up.
The other 3 moved.
They did. But Rosa just shifted over to the window seat. She stayed put.
And when the driver threatened to have her arrested?
She just calmly told him, "You may do that." She later explained her motivation, and this part is so important. She said she wasn't physically tired from work. She was tired of giving in.
So the police come, they arrest her. E.D. Nixon bails her out that night. And this is where all that planning you mentioned kicks in.
This is it. The legal team saw this as the perfect test case. They knew Rosa Parks. They knew her impeccable character, her quiet strength, her history as an activist. She was the ideal person to represent the cause.
And their legal strategy was brilliant. They weren't just fighting her specific arrest.
No, not at all. They allowed her to be convicted in the city court because they needed to lose at the state level. That was the only way they could file the real challenge, a federal lawsuit.
Which became Browder versus Gale.
That was the real legal strategy. They used her case to launch a direct assault on the constitutionality of bus segregation itself, aiming straight for the U.S. Supreme Court. Her arrest wasn't just an event, it was the spark they had been waiting for.
And that spark just ignited the entire community. The Montgomery bus boycott.
It was immediate. On the first day of the boycott, that Monday morning, the buses were practically empty. Something like 90% of the city's black ridership refused to ride. They walked.
And it was only meant to be for one day initially.
But it was so successful, they knew they could keep it going. They formed the Montgomery Improvement Association, the MIA, to organize it, and they chose a new, young minister to lead it.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's right. And the boycott went on for 381 days.
Over a year. That just shows the incredible economic power of the community. They were the main customers.
They were starving the city's transit system of its main source of income. But sustaining that kind of protest, the logistics were almost military-like.
How did they do it? How did they get tens of thousands of people to work every day?
They built an entire parallel transit system, a massive coordinated carpool network, hundreds of private cars, with dispatch centers run out of church basements, coordinating routes all across the city. It was an amazing operation.
And the city was fighting back hard.
Oh, absolutely. They arrested drivers for tiny traffic violations. They tried to cancel insurance for the carpool vehicles. They even charged the MIA leaders with violating anti-conspiracy laws.
And people were losing their jobs. Rosa Parks and her husband both did.
They were blacklisted. People were walking miles in the heat and the cold, facing constant threats. To keep morale up, they held these huge community meetings in churches. They were part strategy session, part pep rally.
And all while this is happening on the ground, the legal case is moving up through the courts.
Right. While the community walked, Browder v. Gale was making its way to the Supreme Court. And in November 1956, the ruling came down.
Segregation on public buses was unconstitutional.
The court declared that separate facilities were inherently unequal. It was the legal death blow.
The boycott ended in December 1956.
And Rosa Parks was one of the first people to ride the newly integrated buses. It was a huge victory, but for her personally, the struggle wasn't over.
Life in Montgomery was still dangerous.
Very. The threats continued, and because they were blacklisted, she and her husband just couldn't find steady work.
So they moved.
In 1957, they moved to Detroit for safety and for work. But she never stopped her activism. She worked on fair housing issues, and for decades she worked as an assistant for a member of Congress.
And she eventually received the nation's highest honors, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal. She became known as the mother of the civil rights movement.
Her quiet, prepared act really did change the nation. It proved that one person, when backed by careful planning and a committed community, can stand up to an unjust system and win.
She passed away in 2005 at 92 and became the first woman in history to lie in honor in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. So just think about those 381 days people walked to work. What's something you believe in enough to sacrifice a year of your own comfort for? See you next time.